Robert Thomas chases Connor Hellebuck behind the Winnipeg net, and that's where the game turns. Not in a shot or a goal or one clean highlight where our hero does the obvious star thing. Hellebuck goes back to play the puck. Thomas closes on him. He doesn't coast into the forecheck. He doesn't let somebody else do the unpleasant part. Stick in, pressure on, puck loose. Pavel Buchnevich collects it and tucks it into an abandoned net. Enterprise Center throws hats. Thomas doesn't score the goal. That'd be too clean, too easy, too obvious. He just creates the panic, gives somebody else the finish, and leaves his fingerprints all over the crime scene. That's why we're starting here. Oh look, he must be serious. He has several whiteboards. Welcome Blue 1. I'm documenting 1 game per player till we reach 100. Robert Thomas. Episode 1 is Robert Thomas, not because he's the loudest Blue or the nastiest Blue, the guy most likely to give you one perfect clip, then call it a night. He's here because on April 24th, 2025, he gave St. Louis the thing every playoff team needs: control. Not boring control or spreadsheet control, real control. The kind where the game keeps finding his stick, and when it does, somebody else wearing blue is about to get a better chance than they had 2 seconds ago. The Blues beat the Winnipeg Jets 7-2 in Game 3 of the Western Conference first round. Buchnevich had a hat trick and an assist. Cam Fowler had a goal and 4 assists, setting a playoff record for points by a defenseman. Thomas has 4 assists. St. Louis cuts Winnipeg's series lead to 2-1, and the important part is not just that the Blues won, it's how fast they changed the emotional temperature of the series. St. Louis didn't enter this series as an obvious contender. They finished 44-30-8, good for 96 points, and the second wild card in the Western Conference. It's pretty good, right? It's not the favorite, though. They had already changed coaches midstream when they fired Drew Bannister and hired Jim Montgomery in November. The timing was weird because Montgomery was fired by Boston just 5 days earlier. But the end of the regular season changed the whole read on them. The Blues got hot at exactly the right time. They ripped off a franchise record 12-game winning streak in late March and early April, with Thomas sitting right in the middle of it. Against Colorado on April 5th, he had a goal and 3 assists. St. Louis pushed their streak to 12. Then Winnipeg stopped it. So the Jets weren't an abstract top seed waiting in the bracket. They were the team that looked at St. Louis and said, bring it. Winnipeg beat the Blues 3-1 on April 7th, ended their streak, and reminded them that playoff hockey was about to be a different exam. The Blues still clinched. They blasted Utah 6-1 on April 15th, securing the playoff berth. Thomas extended this point streak to 12 games, while finishing the regular season with 21 goals and 60 assists in 70 games. So when this series opened, St. Louis was dangerous. Not safe. That's a good playoff identity, honestly. Dangerous means you can hurt people. Not safe means you could still hurt yourself. Winnipeg got here with the opposite kind of story. They weren't chasing. They were defending the top of the league. They finished 56-22-4, 116 points, won the Central Division, and claimed the President's Trophy. Connor Hellebuck had the kind of regular season that goalies dream about. 47 wins, 8 shutouts, a 2.00 goals against average, and a .925 save percentage. So you're not looking at a fake 1 seed. Kyle Connor gave them star scoring. Mark Scheifele gave them top blue line. Josh Morrissey organized the blue line, and Hellebuck gave them the argument ender in net. And Scott Arniel, in his first season as Winnipeg's full-time head coach, took Greg Bonus' structure and drove it all the way to the best regular season record in the entire league. That's the setup. The Blues are a late surging wild card. The Jets are the measuring stick. After 2 games in Winnipeg, the measuring stick was winning. The Jets took Game 1 5-3, and they took Game 3 2-1. So Game 3 in St. Louis is not technically elimination. But emotionally, yeah, it kind of was. Go down 3-0 to the President's Trophy winner, and the series becomes less climb and more dig. Jim Montgomery and Scott Arniel are a good contrast for this game. Montgomery's season had already turned strange before he got to St. Louis. Boston fired him after he started 8-9-3. Although he'd gone 120, 41, and 23 with the Bruins, and coached the 2022-23 team to the best regular season record in NHL history. 5 days later, the Blues grabbed him. He comes to St. Louis as both a rescue and a reset. He knows the organization. He'd been an assistant here from 2020 through 2022. He also arrives with the weight of recent playoff disappointment because that record-setting Bruins team, they famously didn't finish the job. So Montgomery's job here is not just tactics. It's belief management. He has to convince a team that changed coaches, chased the season, got hot late, then fell behind 2-0, that the series is still alive. Arnold's job is different. He's not rescuing anything. He's protecting the thing he helped build. He's a former Jets player, longtime coach, associate under Rick Bowness. Now he's the guy entrusted with the best regular season team in hockey. That sounds comfortable till the playoffs start. That's when comfort becomes pressure, because the President's Trophy doesn't come with armor. It comes with people trying to call you a fraud. And in Game 3, St. Louis punches Winnipeg right in the mouth. These teams see each other enough to know where the bruises are. They play a similar emotional language. Deep shifts, net front punishment, defensive structure, and enough skill to make the ugly stuff count. There's also 2019 sitting in the background. The Blues beat Winnipeg in the first round that year, and then kept going all the way to the first Stanley Cup in franchise history. So for St. Louis, Winnipeg is attached to the Cup memory. For Winnipeg, St. Louis is attached to the prove-it-in-spring problem. That doesn't make a blood feud, it makes it useful television. Then there's Hellebuck. When the best goalie in the sport is on the other side, the opponent becomes less of a team and more like a puzzle. St. Louis doesn't have to beat Winnipeg. It has to make Hellebuck uncomfortable enough that the whole structure starts making faces. That's exactly what Game 3 does. 48 seconds in, Buchnevich scores. That's the first rupture. Fowler throws the puck towards the front, hits traffic, Buchnevich finishes the play. St. Louis has the building before Winnipeg even has any oxygen. Then Thomas, who else, draws a tripping penalty on Luke Schenn at 1:58. Thomas didn't just pass his way into history here. He forced Winnipeg to defend him immediately, and Winnipeg failed. The Blues go back to the power play. At 3:11, Thomas feeds Buchnevich. Buchnevich scores again, and it's 2-0. It's a pretty bad 3 minutes for a road favorite. You're up 2-0 in the series. You've got the best goalie alive, the President's Trophy. Suddenly, the building's going nuts around you, like the bracket's been rewritten. The first period keeps leaning blue. 15:51, Thomas finds Cam Fowler coming through the middle. Fowler beats Hellebuck, high glove side, and St. Louis leads 3-0. Later, Fowler said Thomas made the whole thing possible, which basically is the Robert Thomas thesis in one sentence. The second period doesn't give us a goal, but it gives us the hinge. Winnipeg thinks Cole Perfetti has scored on a power play. Binnington gloved it. The review stays with the call on ice. No goal. That keeps the game 3-0 and keeps the building in St. Louis's hands. That's playoff hockey. Not every massive play shows up on the scoreboard. Sometimes it's the goal that never becomes real. Sometimes it's a review. Early in the third, Winnipeg finally gets one. David Gustafsson, no relation, scores at 4:32, and now it's 3-1. Not panic, just a little pressure. 52 seconds later, though, Thomas removes it. He goes after Hellebuck behind the net, steals the puck, and Buchnevich completes the hat trick into the open net. So now it's 4-1. That's the play. That's the play from the cold open because that's the play that explains the night. Thomas isn't just a pretty passer. He's not just a guy waiting on the half wall for someone else to retrieve the puck. He creates the turnover himself, and the hat trick goal becomes a playmaking goal without being a pass. Then the game breaks open. Jordan Kyrou scores on a 5-on-3. Alexei Toropchenko redirects one in and chases Hellebuck. Neil Pionk gets one back on the power play. Colton Parayko finishes the scoring with another power play goal. Thomas getting his fourth assist. The final is Blues 7, Jets 2. The funny thing about a 7-2 game is that it feels like it should be total domination in every column. It's not quite that clean. St. Louis had 28 shots on goal. Winnipeg had 19. That's a real edge. Hellebuck allowed 6 goals on 25 shots before Eric Comrie came in and allowed 1 on 3. The useful point is this. The Blues didn't bury Winnipeg under volume. They punished moments. They scored early. They scored in the power play. They converted the Hellebuck mistake. They protected the second period hinge when Winnipeg thought it had life. Then they turned the third period into a finishing drill. Special teams stretched the score, and the Jets. St. Louis scored 3 power play goals. Thomas had 2 power play assists. Winnipeg got 1 power play goal from Pionk, but the Jets couldn't turn their chances into enough scoreboard pressure before the game escaped. Thomas's individual line is clean. 4 assists plus 3, 2 penalty minutes. Just the third star of the game. No goals, but he's still the engine, and that's why this is his episode. Thomas said the Blues' top players had to answer because Winnipeg's top players had been a major reason that St. Louis fell behind 2-0 in the series. He pointed to Buchnevich's stepping up immediately. That's leadership language, but it's also matchup language. Your best people have to dent their best people. Buchnevich talked about emotion and crowd energy. Fowler talked about the defense using its legs, jumping into the rush, and making Winnipeg defend motion from the back end. Binnington pointed to the importance of preserving a 3-0 lead through the second period. Montgomery's read was exactly what you'd want from a coach after a desperate Game 3 win. He didn't treat it like magic. He praised the start, the aggression. The phrase that matters from him is fierce, competitive nature. That's the diagnosis. Not finesse and not vibes. Competitive nature. Meanwhile, Arniel has to stand there and call the first period what it was. He said Winnipeg lost the game in the first and called the Jets terrible in that opening frame. He also tried to contain the damage by saying, one loss is one loss, whether it's 7-2 or 1-0. He's right, technically, but emotionally, no. A 7-2 playoff loss is not the same as 1-0, not when your Vezina-level goalie gets chased. Not when the series shifts cities and the underdog suddenly looks like it found the pressure point. So, as for what this game means to Robert Thomas, this is a perfect signature game because it doesn't require us to pretend he's something else. He's not a classic power forward. He's not a volume shooter. He's not the guy whose value is easiest to explain in one clip. That can sound like a backhanded compliment until you watch this game. Then it becomes the whole point. The puck moves through him and arrives better than it left. Fowler got a cleaner look. Buchnevich gets a tap in. Periaco gets the power play finish, and Hellebuck gets pressure turned into a mistake. Thomas controls the next thing. That's a star skill, and it's especially important in the playoffs because playoff hockey takes away comfort. Time shrinks, space shrinks, pretty plays die at the blue line. Centers who still think under pressure become extremely expensive pieces of real estate. This game says Robert Thomas can be that. Not someday, but that night. The Blues didn't waste their momentum. Game 4 stayed in St. Louis, and the Blues won 5-1. Hellebuck allowed 5 goals on 18 shots and got pulled for the second straight game. And now the series is tied 3-2, and the President's Trophy winner had a real problem. Winnipeg answered in Game 5. St. Louis answered in Game 6. What? Yeah. The Blues led 3-1 in the final 2 minutes of regulation. Winnipeg pulled Hellebuck. Vladislav Nemestikov made it 3-2 with 1:56 left. Cole Perfetti tied it with 2.2 seconds left. Yeah. Then Adam Lowry won it in double overtime. Ugh. So that's a brutal ending for St. Louis, but it also clarifies what this series was. They weren't a polite wildcard team. They're a real threat. They pushed the top seed to the edge, attacked Hellebuck repeatedly in St. Louis, and came within one defensive breath of advancing. For the Blues, this is both proof and punishment. Proof the late season surge is real, punishment because being real still wasn't quite enough. So you may ask, why start the Blue 100 with Robert Thomas? This project is not just about the biggest statue guys. It's about finding a game where where a player's value becomes visible. April 24, 2025 is that game for Thomas. 4 assists, 2 on the power play. Forced turnover on a hat trick. A first period pass that lets Fowler jump into history. And a third period pressure play that kills Winnipeg's comeback pulse before it even starts beating. Buchnevich gets the hats, Fowler gets the record, Bennington gets the building, Thomas gets my episode. That feels okay. Because the assist, quite literally, the assist is the point. Next time we go back to the Warriors for Warrior 26, which is Moses Moody. November 19th, 2025. Steph Curry scores only 9 points in New Orleans. Usually sounds like a problem. Moses Moody, though, hits 8 threes, scores a career-high 32. Golden State wins 124-106. That's next. This was Robert Thomas. Blue 1. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.